Hello. Welcome to the University of Nottingham, and with me today I have Dr. Christina Lee, who's the Associate Professor in Viking Studies, and she comes from the School of English. And Christina, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, you are an expert in the Vikings, and one aspect of the Vikings that fascinates people is the whole area of Norse religion. Would you like to, in the matter of the few minutes that we have, try to give us a quick intro into Norse religion?
Oh, it is a vast field, but
okay, we know that.
I will try. In Norse mythology, we have a pantheon of gods and goddesses. That's very important. We have a chief god who is a god of war, but also a god of poetry, Odin. We have Thor, who is a god of strength, but also a defender of the gods. We have a god of beauty, Balder. We have actually a world that is, we've got gods that are not immortal. They live longer than others, but they, for example, need an apple a day to keep going. The goddess Idun gives them the apple. An apple a day, keeps death away. We actually also have a theology that has got a beginning and an end. The world is created out of the body parts of a giant. In the beginning there is nothing, and then there's fire and ice, and we have a cow licking beings from the ice. And we also have an end. Many people know Ragnarok. They do know, stuff that the world of the Norse gods is final, and the gods know it. This is the really interesting aspect of Norse mythology, that Odin goes around and asks a number of very intelligent beings, how will it end, including dead giantesses and all kinds of people. And he's always told, in the end, there is going to be a civil war, the gods are going to fall out, and the giants are going to move back in, and the world will crash and burn. And in some of the mythological poems, we are given an aspect that there might be another world that is coming up, that is already waiting in the wings. So unlike the monotheistic religions, we actually have gods that are also highly fallible. In a lot of our Norse poems, we have two crucial texts from which we know about mythology, and they're all from 13th century Iceland. It's the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. The Prose Edda compiled by Snorri Sturluson. The Poetic Edda, a compilation of poetry about the gods and about legend. It's not all about the gods. But in some of these poems, the gods are actually no more than some whinging beings. We've got them being quite nasty to each other. We've got them being not all powerful, accusing each other, of doing all kinds of bizarre deeds, and the goddesses. So it's it's very entertaining mythology.
I have two questions, because I know people who know nothing about the Vikings or their religion will know the word Valhalla.
Valhalla is the hall of the slain. We have this idea that to win the battle in the end, Odin needs an army of the dead. So the best of warriors will die on the battlefield. They're going to be chosen by the Valkyria, again the word for slain, and chooser, the choosers of the slain. They are female beings, and they will be taken to Valhalla. It's not the only place where the gods go to. Where the dead go to. There is also Freya's hall, where so she hosts part of the dead. So we've got the goddess of beauty, that also has the goddess of love, who also hosts part of the dead. But Valhalla is the hall of Odin, and what we have is the dead are going to be feasted at night from a goat. So there's mead kind of coming from this goat, and they fight all day.
You mentioned Snorri Sturluson and the Prose Edda. Is there a problem with the fact that most of what we know about the Norse pantheon, since it has to survive through writing, is actually being recorded by Christians?
Yes and no. Mythology continues to be important in poetry. Norse mythology doesn't go away. And Judith Yesh, who is my colleague here at Nottingham, has coined the idea of a cultural paganism. So even though you are a Christian, your identity and your culture includes this paganism, and this could be accommodated. We have some really interesting cross shafts in the north of England, for example at Halton, where we have parts from legend. We have Sigurd. Now Sigurd is not explicitly pagan, but he's associated with Eddic poems, so he's part of the legend. He's not explicitly Christian. And we do get depictions on the Gosforth Cross that are both from Norse mythology and from Christian iconography. And some people have said, well, you know, this is someone who's sitting on the fence. Some people have said it's didactic, you know, to teach them. I actually think these are people who are very aware of their cultural inheritance and who continue to retell their cultural inheritance. And this is why I've stressed myth. We do get some contemporary writers who go to Scandinavia. Again, they are Christians. If we think about Adam of Bremen, who tells us something about the temple in Uppsala, you know, who have some knowledge or have some narratives that they know of. And they tell us a little bit about paganism, but that, again, is, they're not writing for other pagans. They're writing for Christians, and Christians have a particular way of needing to be understanding these gods.
And of course this concept of cultural paganism is something that people in an earlier period looking at the Mediterranean world are quite familiar with. The Greek fathers all knew Homer, and the Latin fathers could read Virgil and read the Eclogues and see it as a foretelling of the coming of Jesus. So what you're saying is that the cultural paganism that you find in a Christian Norse world is actually just a recycling of something you find in the earlier world of the Mediterranean, where people continue to read the classics. You've always got a couple of extremists like Jerome, who, you know, it's all or nothing. Am I a Christian or am I a Ciceronian? But most people, Augustine, Basil, all the greats, they can be both civilized inheritors of the classics and they can be Christian. And of course in Ireland you have the exact same situation again. You have the survival of old Irish, the old Irish pantheon and old Irish mythology being recounted in monasteries. This
is absolutely right and really important, because there's so many people who assume that Christianity was a no-fun religion and just eradicate or try to eradicate all kinds of paganism. That's not right. We do get people such as Wulfstan in the 10th century, early 11th, you know, stuff who writes about the false gods. But it's didactic. It's more, you know, exasperated. You know, it's not even, you know, it's not even right. But we do get this mythology survive. It does survive. It survives in poetry. It's important for the formation of poetic devices in Norse culture. But there's also a really interesting, what you just said, a really interesting aspect. When Snorri writes the Prose Edda, he has a prologue that actually says, well, all the Norse gods, they really came from Asia. And Thor is Hector. And he does a connection with the classical world. He is writing the Norse pantheon into the classical world. And I think this is also where you want to see yourselves in the world. In 13th century Iceland, you do not want to be someone who is on a place out there. You want to be part of Europe. And Chaucer still uses, you know, some of the pagan myths. So it's not a problem.
Christina, thank you very much for giving us a very good and succinct introduction to the Pantheon, but thanks also for another thing, and that is pointing out that medieval religion is not the black and white affair that we often project onto it. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. It's all about people, isn't it?
Indeed it is.